Tudong Tales, Part 1, Tudong 13, as taught by Ruesi Ling, translated and narrated by myself. Hello, all faithful devotees. Today I would like to teach you the methods of practice which were given to me by my Kruba Ajahn, Luang Parn, Sunanto of Wat Bang Nom Ko, be it from the times I was on Tudong, wandering in the forest and the jungles, the caves and the mountains, or when I was in the temple. In the days when we practiced under Luang Parn, in those days, it was regardless if you were on Tudong in the forest or in the temple, the rules of the practice and the efforts of each practitioner and monk was the same, regardless of whether you were out in the forest or residing in the temple during the rainy season. But please, bhikkhus, monks, do not be discouraged or scared when I tell you that this same level of practice must be sustained every day, wherever you are. Because you have heard me speak before that to practice properly, you must possess the following things, which is quite daunting in itself. Because according to the teachings of practice of my Kruba Ajahn Luang Parn, you must possess the following qualities. 1. Promvihansi, the 4 Brahma viharas. The 4 Brahma vihara, meaning the 4 celestial abodes, Brahma being a kind of deva, celestial or angelic intelligence, both with or without form, for there are 2 kinds, and vihara, meaning home or palace, or abode. The Brahma viharas, or Brahma vihara, the abodes of Brahma, are a series of 4 Buddhist virtues, and the meditation practices made to cultivate them. They are also known as the 4 immeasurables, which, as you can see on screen, has a Sanskrit name, and the 4 infinite minds, and you can see the Chinese name if you are Chinese. And the Brahma viharas are 1. Metta, which means compassion or feeling for the suffering of other beings. 2. Karuna, generosity, which means the ability to give of yourself or of your possessions to others. 3. Mudita, which means basically the inherent intention to be helpful towards others and the inherent wish to help all others. And 4. Upekkha, equanimity, which is greatly understood as not really caring about anything and being kind of neutral about everything. But that is apiyagrit, that is limbo. That is a completely different state of mind. And upekkha is only there when you have the metta, the compassion, the karuna, the generosity, the mudita, the intention and willingness to give compassionately, not to just think about it and be able to do it, but to actually actively wish to do it and to do it when you can. And upekkha is the letting go of when you want to help but you can't, so that you don't suffer, which is why a bodhisattva can be an enlightened Buddha, even though he is concerned about the suffering of other beings. Because even though he is concerned, if he cannot help or she cannot help. Actually, we are not male or female in that level of existence. If this being cannot help, a bodhisattva, it's hermaphroditic, yin-yang, male, female, day, night, blinking, on, off, up, down, wrong, right, false conditioned thinking. It's linear dualistic. So that was me just adding the teaching of the 4 Brahma Viharas, and now I shall go back to narrating in direct translation, speaking as Luang Ruesi Ling Dam. So the second thing he gave was 2, the 4 Itipada, Itibadsi. Yeah, the 4 Itibadas. The 4 Itibadas or Itibadsi are basically the results of 4 great exertions, also mentioned in the Buddha's teaching, 4 great, making a great effort, and are also known as 4 kinds of powers or achievements. And they are also 4 bases for further development. This basically means focusing and concentrating on your own intentions, how much effort you are making, concentrating and noticing the various aspects of your own consciousness, and also concentrating on investigating and being conscious of all phenomena, and asking yourself things like, are they conditioned? Are they unconditioned? Am I conditioning them even though they are non-conditioned? And so on. So it's not just concentration, but it is an act of noticing in these 4 practices, which were given by Luang Parn as part of the many practices which must be made by a monk of his lineage, be it on Tudong in the forest, traveling, or just in the temple during the rainy season in the usual duties of a monk within a temple. The rules remain the same because they are the rules of the Buddha and the rules of the Tudong Sipsam or the 13 Dhutanga. These 4 qualities in Pali are chanta or chanda, viriya, citta, and vimamsa, and this was the first of various sets of practices which must be applied to anybody who was ordained under the great Luang Parn Sunanto, including Luang Ruesi Ling Dam, with whose talk on this Tudong tale I shall now begin to continue after listing the rest of the practices which Luang Ruesi Ling Dam stated, and asking his monks not to be afraid of the complex sounding nature of them all, because going into the forest applied practice is different from the academic study and understanding of what one has to peruse and apply as a practice when on Tudong in the forest, and indeed if a Tudong monk all the time, wherever you are. The second of the set of practices which must be applied under Luang Parn and Luang Ruesi Ling Dam are the 4 right exertions, or the 4 great exertions. These 4 great exertions, or right exertions, are actually only 2 practices, but academically they are split into leaving the inauspicious deeds of the past behind and sustaining the merits of the good deeds of the past behind, and to avoid regrettable deeds or unskillful deeds in the present and future, and to create auspicious and do good deeds in the present and future. You cannot change the past. And so this second practice of Luang Por Parn and of the Buddha is called the Samapatansi, the four Samapadanas, the four great exertions, which is to avoid the bad karma of the past and leave it behind and let go of it, and to sustain the good deeds of the past, and to create more good deeds in the future, and to avoid bad deeds in the future and the present, of course. This was the second practice of development of qualities which must be practiced, if not mastered, by he who shall ordain and perform the 13 Tudong practices of the Thai forest tradition Tudong masters. Luang Por Ruesi continues, please do not be discouraged, O monks, O bhikkhus, when I tell you about this practice, because you have heard me so often speak of these things, and that the third thing is that you must have the jhana sipha, the 15 tendencies of behavior and attainments, the last 4 of which are the last 5 of which include the first, second, third, and fourth jhana or dhyana or Zen state of mind, which are the 4 states of mental absorption in concentration, samadhi or samadhi meditation, which will take the practitioner into the immaterial realms where insights are gained into the true nature of all things, where all words stop and all conditioned ways of seeing things fall apart and things just remain how they are, what they are, without names, including your own consciousness and its awareness of its consciousness and that which is around and within it. The 4th quality which should be practiced is the development of the Barami Sip, the 10 perfections, which the Buddha managed to perfect to become an arahant, an enlightened being. And all of these 4 applied practices which are demanded by the lineage of Wat Bang Nom Ko, Wat Tha Sung, Luang Por Parn, and Luang Por Ruesi Ling Dam for true Tudong 13 practice must be present as attempted applied practice and with constant strengthened effort and development. And he asks his monks, please do not be daunted when you consider all of these things which you must apply, because all good things come in their own time. But Luang Por Ruesi Ling Dam says to his bhikkhus, please do not be daunted by this, even though I know many of you will be thinking, ooh, that's a lot of things to keep in mind all at the same time. Does it have to be as hard as this? He says, as I was preparing to ordain, even a long time before I actually ordained, I was learning with Luang Por Parn, and he taught me all of these things, which should be learned academically and slowly understood so that you can know them intuitively and apply them into your practice until they become second nature. And this is what you call in Thai, Song Pen Arom. Song means to wear. Pen Arom, it's your mood. To wear it as your constant state of mind. That these qualities are to greater or lesser extent present. Luang Por Parn taught Luang Por Ruesi Ling Dam that until he could contain this state of mind and this collection of attitudes present within him, that he would not ordain him, and that when he had learned to possess these qualities to lesser or greater extent and move the wheels of each particular quality into motion, perpetual motion of constant development, then he would be ready to ordain him as a bhikkhu into the Buddha Sasana, meaning a Buddhist monk into the Buddhist religion. This means that the Tudong practitioner, when practicing, uses his consciousness to remain aware and focused on all of the aspects which will lead him to self-purification and enlightenment, and to the destruction of the false view of a self that does not exist, and to attain nibbana, to attain awakened arahantship. And that for this reason the Tudong monk can, although his mind is still through these practices, cannot let go of any of these things within his heart as a second nature, within his mind, without having to have a monologue to list it to himself, but to have it constantly present within during one's stillness of mind. One must still keep all of these things, bearing them in mind whilst practicing, in order to not commit some kind of transgression against any of these rules and aspects of practice. Luang Parn taught Luang Ruesi Ling, who taught all his bhikkhus to learn the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga, all 40 paragraphs of it. Visuddhimagga is a teaching which contains 40 objects of the Kammatthana Vipassana practice, and teaches firstly how to find a good teacher, secondly how to practice samatha, concentration, meditation, and the 40 practices of the Kammatthana, Vipassana Kammatthana, the Kammatthana, 40 practices of the Tudong Vipassana monk, forest monk, as taught by the Buddha. The third part, which is actually 3 to 7, parts 3 to 7 of the Abhidhamma, teaches you about the 5 khandhas or skandhas or 5 aggregates, the ayatana, the 6 or 12 inner and outer sense objects of ear and sound, eyes and object, and so on. Yeah, and also teaches of the Padicca Samuppada or Padicca Samuppada, which means dependent origination. And Vipassana Kammatthana is based upon all of these principles, and so this is very important for the Tudong forest tradition practitioner of Dhutanga or Tudong 13 Dhutanga practices of the monk, apart from the 227 practices of a monk. Be you in the forest or in the temple, the practice must be sustained 24/7, 365. If not, enlightenment is only temporary, and it is just a state of meditation. But the object of attaining these insights in meditation is to manifest them and make them permanent after you have stopped any ritualistic meditation session. And so the Tudong forest tradition, Luang Parn, Luang Ruesi Ling, and this lineage, and also the lineage of Luang Man and Luang Sao, who began the Kammatthana forest tradition Tudong monk lineage in the first place in Thailand, to return to the original practices as taught by the Buddha, because they saw that Buddhism in Thailand had lost its path a little bit and was straying from the main teaching of the Buddha, which was solitude and self-introspective, critical analysis, based on knowledge of certain aspects of human nature and the nature of all things, and using meditation to gain insight. And the Visuddhimagga or the Visuddhimagga is one of the things which must be studied and put into practice by the Tudong monk. Luang Parn and Luang Ruesi Ling also taught the Tudong practitioner the following. Above all things, whilst keeping your practices in mind, beware that none of the 5 hindrances sneak in and enter into your psyche and your mind and your heart without you noticing, and always be on watch for the 5 hindrances, or as we say in Thai and Pali, nivarana. In Thai, nivarana, nivarana, the 5 nivarana. The 5 hindrances, or pancha nivarani in Hindi, are identified as mental factors, and they hinder your progress in meditation and in your daily life. And in the Tudong tradition, these 5 hindrances are obstacle to jhana, and jhana is one of the most important parts of kammatthana practice, of the 40 Vipassana practices, to attain the 4 jhanas of concentration and complete absorption. And they are obstacles to tranquility in normal meditation. And in insight meditation or mindfulness practice, which is Vipassana kammatthana, the 5 hindrances or the nivarana are obstacles to Vipassana. The 5 hindrances are sensory desire or kamachanta, and this kind of desire seeks happiness through the 5 senses, the ayatana, which you already learned in the teachings of Luang Parn in the Tudong 13, which are the 5 senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and physical feeling. But actually they are 12 objects of taste, because the taste is not listed. If you go to Wikipedia and you look up the 5 hindrances, you will not find taste. There are 6, not 5. And so you have the tongue and taste, you have touch and sensation, you have sensory desires, you have ill will, which means wanting to reject, or hostility, resentment, hatred, bitterness, feeling wrong done, feeling sorry for yourself, and sloth and torpor, which is laziness or heaviness of body, dullness of mind, and it pulls you down and disables your inertia, and can even lead to depression. And so to beware of, and of doubt in the Buddha, or doubt in the practice you are practicing, and that you should beware of these 5, the nivarana, the 5 hindrances, and not permit them to arise. Once these achievements have begun to be practiced, even if not yet achieved, but the wheels are in motion of all of these aspects of practice, then Tudong 13 can begin. So what are the 13 Tudong practices, or Dhutanga practices? These are ascetic practices, and in the Visuddhimagga or the Visuddhimagga, which was previously mentioned, there is a whole chapter which discusses the Tudong 13, and it lists all of the practices. And these are the practices as listed in the Visuddhimagga. 1. To refuse rag wearers practice, which means wearing robes made from discarded or soiled cloth, dirty cloth, and not accepting ready-made robes, new ones made by karavasa, householders, devotees. Triple-robe-wearer practice, Having and wearing only 3 robes, which are the 3 main components of a monk's robes. You can have 4 or 5, but it is usually called patrai, which means the 3-piece robe, yeah, which is the skirt, the jivara robe, what you cover your body with, and the belt, or the skirt, the jivara robe, and the sankati vest. There's usually the jivara robe, the belt, and the skirt. 3. The alms-food-eater's practice. To eat only food collected on pindapata, almsround, and not accepting food inside the vihara shrine, the temple, or by invitation in the house of a layman. The 4th practice is the house-to-house seeker's practice. Not omitting any house while going for alms. Not choosing only going to rich households, or selecting certain households for your own personal reasons. The 5th Tudong practice is the one-sessioner practice of eating only 1 meal a day and refusing other food offered before midday after you have eaten that, even if it's before midday and you are allowed to. Those gone forth may not, unless ill, partake of food from midday until dawn of the next day. The 6th practice is the bowl food eater's practice, which means eating food from your bowl, which is mixed together, so you mix it all up with your hand, rather than from plates and dishes and with a spoon. You eat with your hand, and you mix the sweet, the sour, the salty, all together in the bowl, without preference. The 7th practice is that of the bowl of the later food refuser's practice, which means to not take any more food after you are full, or after one has shown that one is satisfied, even though lay people might wish to offer you more. Only accept enough food that you need to eat. This is a great mistake made by modern monks, that they take everything that is given to them. The 8th practice is the forest dweller's practice, which means to not stay or dwell in a town or a village. Rather, you should live in seclusion, away from all kinds of distractions, in the forest, in a cave, and, in German, entfernt, at a distance from other humans, to seek solitude, yeah, and to live in the forest. And the 9th practice is the tree root dweller's practice, is to live under a tree without the shelter of a roof for as long as possible. The 10th is the open air dweller's practice, which is to refuse to live under a roof and a tree root, and this practice may be undertaken sheltered by a tent of robes. So you can use your robes to make a tent and cover yourself. That's all. The 11th practice is the charnel ground dweller's practice. Sapadanik'anga, yeah, living in a charnel field, which means a cemetery, a graveyard, or a cremation ground. Yeah, but in ancient India, of course, in the times of the Buddha, there would have been many abandoned and unburied corpses, as well as some partially cremated corpses. And so the Buddha taught asupapavana, to look at corpses during your time in cemeteries and places where the dead were around, to see corpses in, I believe, 9 different kinds of states, bleeding, bloated, and so on, chopped into pieces, and so on, and to examine the body and think, this could be me. This is a human just like me. I could be like that. And you lose the sense of self. This is one way of destroying the false sense of a self that does not exist. The 12th practice is the any bed user's practice, which means being satisfied with any dwelling given to you as a sleeping place, even if there's a red ant's nest in it that's biting your ass off. And the 13th is the sitter's practice, which means living only in the 3 postures, yeah, which means you're allowed to walk, you can stand and sit, but you can never lie down, which means if you do 10 years of Tudong, you will never lay down to sleep. Yeah, you can only walk, stand, sleep while you're standing, or sit and sleep while you're sitting. Meditation is usually used to relax instead of sleeping. And so, in truth, a successful Tudong master would not sleep for a decade or however long he practiced, even in the temple, which would mean throughout his life. Once Luang Por Lucy Lingdam had been ordained by Luang Por Parn. On the first evening, Luang Por Parn took Luang Por Lucy Lingdam to the cemetery and placed him in a gatom, which means a hut, where they kept all of the corpses for cremation in the crematorium, and let him stay there for the night to meditate upon the corpses. Luang Por Parn then told Luang Por Lucy Lingdam to stay there all night and to practice kamatan, Vipassana, as much as he could, and that whatever happened during the night inside the hut full of corpses, he should not come out, and he should not seek out Luang Por Parn for any reason during the night. He should only seek him out during the day, and that he should not come out from the hut. And Luang Por Lucy says to his monks in this teaching, which I am translating, amongst inserting various insights to help you understand, is that he says, you may all think that's a bit strict, isn't it? A little bit over the top. But for me, actually, it wasn't. It was quite okay, and it was fitting with what I expected to be the practice of a monk and the methods of self-development. The reason I felt this was the same reason I became ordained in the first place, through great intention, was that the purpose of the practice of the Tudong monk is to not feel fear or excitement and over-happiness or over-sadness, but to seek nibbana, which is peace and absence of such inner disturbances and such ripples on the water. And so one should not feel that something bad or good is happening. And so Luang Por Lucy Lingdam remained in the state between that, which is stillness, and not falling into either of the dualistic states of emotional distress or disturbance or excitement, which is not peace and not nirvana, by being influenced, feeling that any occurrences within the hut and the corpses, or anything that might occur within his mind to do with that, should waver him, because the duty of the monk is to remain unwavered by any event within or without. And so this was fitting for the practice and correct as the teaching of Luang Por Parn. And so he followed this order. Before Luang Por Lucy Lingdam ordained his students, he told them that they should know that the element of paranoia or wrong thinking, wrong interpretation will always be present, but that with the kammatthana practice, when applied properly, consciousness of the presence of that paranoia will be there, and the tools to keep it at its minimal and not let it take over the mind as a hindrance will be enough to not eliminate it until enlightenment, but to keep it under control instead of it having you under its control. And that one should know this and always be aware of it and beware of it. Better said, be wary of it. And that it does not matter whether it is a vision or something you are seeing inside you, or a sound outside of you, or a thought or a feeling. is completely irrelevant, that you should be aware of its nature constantly. And that this kind of paranoid, pathological thinking and thought process, which can disturb your practice, you should be always wary of it and always watching out for it. And I give this to you, says Luang Ruesi Lingdam to his students. I give this to you as one of your methods of practice, which I order you to apply so that you will not slip in your practice when you ordain. And this is the basis of everything you need to know and to apply to be a real Tudong monk and perhaps one day become a Tudong master. I also give these rules of practice because if you do not have these intentions in your heart and mind when you ordain, this means you are just ordaining for a personal purpose, which is the same as buying a ticket to hell, because you are not ordaining for the right reasons. And so this is the basis of ordination, or for practice as a lay master or a lay practitioner in the practice of Tudong 13, or how we say in English, Dhutanga, or Tudanga or Dhutanga. Yeah, the 13 practices of Dhutanga. And this is the basis of all Vipassana Kamatan practice and the teachings of Luang Ruesi Lingdam and the beginning of his Tudong tale, which had to begin with this preliminary to explain the effort and the extremity of the ascetic practice of those monks and even lay practitioners who choose to don the practice of Tudong 13. This is the end of Tudong Tale number 1. Ajahn Spencer for the Buddha Magic Project, signing off. Luang Ruesi Lingdam will continue with his tale in part 2.